And good tomorrow. This video is for redressing Hogwarts Legacy issues. A lot of issues have come about since the middle of last month. August, I believe, 25th of August, there might have been a PC hotfix. And since that hotfix has happened, the video RAM in people's graphics cards is using a lot less of the space that the RAM could cover and would assist the game recording really well, playing really well. But because that VRAM as an asset has been lowered, the amount that the game can use in VRAM, a lot of streaming subsystems, a lot of ways that a person's computer can keep data in video RAM and keep it filled, that they have to do a lot more work to keep on top of what's needed now to make the game work. So as someone that ran the game flawlessly for a good year and a half, I found after a recent update that I was getting a lot of little issues. And as a techie, I kind of exacerbated the issues on purpose so I could try to find out what was causing them. And I've gone through and then I proceeded to remove all the issues. And that's nothing special. If I create an issue and then I remove said issue, I mean, that anyone can do that. You know, you can, I blocked off that door with concrete. I can't get through that door anymore. Okay, I removed that concrete, I can now get through that door. Obviously, I created my own issue, I am aware of that. But by doing so, I was able to look at a whole bunch of little things in this game, a whole little bunch of niggles with the game that need to be worked upon. And my apologies. Wow, that's what happens if you miss a button on your amp. I put it in zone 2. One power button, difference of a centimetre. Couldn't get picture up on the screen. Okay, apologies there for the long delay. Look, there is a reason why I boot my computer up after starting this video. I feel that a lot of people might believe that people run, you know, there's a lot of tricks you can do off camera, arguably, prior to a video, which might make the results fake. There's no point for me to do that. I don't need, at least I don't feel I need to. I should just be able to turn Hogwarts on and work, but not quite, because it's Windows. A couple more things are needed to be done. I've got to come into devices. I've got to find the controller. I think because it's a Microsoft Windows product. They make money selling controllers. They don't like other people's controllers to exist on the computer. This controller worked flawlessly with the Windows PC up until an update came to it, which requires now a little bit of a rigmarole process where I have to remove the product, put it in Bluetooth pairing mode and re-add the product. Now, if it was important for me to sort that out, I'm sure there'd be guides on the net telling me where to download an official driver from, or I don't know. But alright, so here it comes. So the one little trick I'm going to do here is I just raise the luminance level on my telly when recording. These are attempted to be HDR videos in hybrid log gamut. Just extending the brightness levels and hopefully making for a good video. But because it's very hard to get shutter speeds up to 120 frames a second, needed to capture 60 frames neat, I opt to record at 30 frames a second. I can handle a 1/60th of a second shutter speeds when recording video. I've got lenses that can do that bright enough to capture this footage. Alright, so look, at anyone thinking that these delays coming into the game are a little bit long, yep, they certainly are. This is a 10-year-old PC. A lot of the antiquated parts that might come with a 10-year-old PC, so it's fair to say that my CPU speed, my drive speeds, arguably my RAM speed, might all be lower than modern computers. Oh, now this is a really good one. So this is the long... Whoa. What I'll do, I'll bring some metrics up on the screen, and in the bottom corner you'll be able to see my CPU usage at full. And they're not coming up. But you just got to give it time, peoples. Right, so this is good, because this is what people experience. So I think when I have long game sessions, the game generates, while you're playing it, some of the in-game shaders, and what it looks like to me is every time I start the game again after a long play session, where quite possibly the game has built a lot of shaders while I was playing, I think this first pass, before we get to the green shader pass screen, you see your CPU being used a lot. Now I don't know if it's somehow trying to incorporate my newly generated shaders into my pool of already done shaders, but this screen can take a while. Now I've never seen it take this long before. Now, that being said, I have rearranged my page file, I've rearranged my game, the drive that I put the game on. I can hear my drives. To me it doesn't sound like the game's crashed. I don't believe I've ever had it really take this long. Maybe twice in the last year and a half have I had a time where either I've crashed the game or for whatever reason the game's had to inspect its own files and it's done this long startup. But the reason I'm going to continue to record this video, the reason I'm still talking, assuming it's just going to come good, is the advice I give people on the internet when seeing this is I tell them, have patience. I say, go make a coffee. Oh, there we go, look at that. So CPU utilization was still up high. It was finishing the CPU pass, and now it's going to do the shader pass. Usually the CPU utilization drops right down while that's happening, but it looks to me like it's simultaneously doing a lot on the CPU as well. So something's a bit different about this startup to all my other ones. That's okay. That's the purpose of this video. What I'd like to do is just be able to show the reduction in micro stutter that can be made if we put a little bit of care into our rigs at this moment in time. I don't mean to say care into our rigs as if you've been careless. Any recent issues you've been having with the game were not your fault. More than likely, you, like everyone else, is suffering from a recent hotfix that simply lowered the amount of VRAM that our video cards are using. And so now that the game subsystems, in order to stream and keep that data happening, are working really hard. Now the point of this video, if we could see a solution, if it was working and I was proud of it, is I would start saying to you what I'd done. Well, I'll tell you now because it's an easy moment to talk. So I moved my game folder off the C drive. And the C drive is where most people, if you've only got one drive in your machine, on that C drive you've got your operating system, you're going to have your programs, in this case Hogwarts Legacy is a game, and you're also going to have a thing called a page file. Now it's the page file on the C drive that for me made the biggest difference for this game. And even putting it on an old 10-year-old hard drive was better than having one drive having all the input-output. So if everything's on one drive, the game has to load all of its data, not straight to your system RAM, whoa, wouldn't that be good? Not straight to your VRAM, wouldn't that be good? But it likes to set everything via the page file. So we don't want that. And if it's all on one drive, that means one drive is reading, for example, from the Hogwarts Legacy directory, and then it's writing to the page file, and then it's reading from the page file to load it into system RAM or VRAM. Now, it's not entirely the way it works. It probably simultaneously loads both of those. But what I found was that if you did a couple of little tricks, you could make the game run really well. So the point of what we're doing here is just to look at the micro stutter. I think people have been dismissing me as a potential useful source of knowledge. Oh, there we go, bit of a jank. Now the game had just come up. I haven't been seeing that lately. I thought I'd gotten rid of all instances of that, but that again is why we're doing this now. I'm just firing up with yesterday's last settings used. I must admit I didn't pay particular attention last night going to bed, like, oh, in the morning I'm going to turn this on and start recording. Now I am still seeing small amounts of micro stutter. But I can confirm yesterday my micro stutter there was just constant. You know, for every 4 seconds I'd have none, then I'd have tons. At the moment I'm getting little bits of micro stutter occasionally at normal areas where the game is loading up data for the areas around it. And that will stop. Once the VRAM gets re-implemented and the game goes back to running the way it was for the first year and a half, this little bit of micro stutter on game data load will completely disappear. But at the moment I get the smallest amounts of micro stutter, depending on if the game has to be loading in game world. So I'm just going to run around the school a little bit because the school has lots of really dense areas with lots of really incredible graphics. So it's probably streaming in lots of data, especially if you come to hit these doors. Right, so if anybody saw that, the microstutter went up right before I hit the door. Right, it's not because it was having a hard time rendering that door. And when I ran towards that other door, it started loading that area ahead of me. So I bet you if I now walk towards it, we won't see any microstutter as we hit that door. It's already done loading for that next zone. Right? Oh no, there was a little bit. I'm wrong. Okay, so look, while I'm here, I'm just going to quickly run down to the dungeon, one of the hardest to render areas of the game. If we're getting microstutter because the video card is choking, right, there's a few reasons it might cause it. It can make sense in some areas, but what I was finding was that I was getting no microstutter when I was walking away from loading zones, and lots of microstutter when I was in areas where it constantly needed to be loading in the game world. And so, for example, if I took my broom beside the ocean and flew, and it limited the number of areas ahead of me, limited the amount of data it was having to bring in as I flew in a particular direction, the microstutter was nil. There we go. So that there is a tuned PC. You're seeing thereabouts nearly 60 frames a second on this sequence here. I find this a really hard sequence to hit. I don't mind if it drops below the frame rate I wish to play the game at on that screen. Just so long as my fans don't get too loud while I'm doing my herbology classes down here in the greenhouse, I'm okay. But I don't mind some low frame rates through that zone. Alright, so let's get out the front of the castle, let's get on a broom and let's fly to Hogsmeade. And we're just going to have a look at the microstutter on a journey traversal on the open world map area. Something where it really does constantly stream in the data. I must admit I'm a little bit unimpressed by the amount of microstutter I am seeing running around here in the castle. It's not bad, but it could be better. And it really does come down to what I'm doing with my drives. So if people could understand, I'm playing this game on like the worst SSD. Like nobody even probably acknowledges such SSDs existed. Right? And I'm talking like a budget drive right when they were kicking over from high quality first and second gen SSD units. The first few waves of budget drives were pretty poor. Right? So putting my page file on a slightly better budget disk, right? A 10-year-old, was it a Samsung Evo 850? They might not be 10 years old. They're pretty old. They're not very good. I mean, they can make your CPU get hit and have it. Okay, so the microstutter there on that bridge transition was the area I was expecting there to only be 3 potential reads of single digits. And hours of playing last night, that's exactly what I had. So, for whatever reason now, the microstutter is worse than it was yesterday. But it could just be that I haven't been playing for hours, it hasn't loaded this stuff into RAM. If anyone looks at my GPU usage, it's now up at 13.5 gig, that's where we want it to be. So we come here into town, it'll briefly go up to 14 or 15, and it'll clear back down to 12, and while that happens, the microstutter will get quite bad, or it'll get janky. So I'm just going to run into town. Let's see it choke, shall we? So watching those numbers, 14.8, 14.4, so it started clearing it. Okay. Oh, there we go. So there was the microstutter, it jumped right up, and we saw some of the graphics appear on the ground. Now, in order to generate these numbers, I've had to force my files onto the worst drives in my system. And, I mean, it alleviated constant microstutter, so I would argue this is better, right? But you're probably going to get better experiences than this if you don't put your page file on an ancient budget SSD and don't put your game on an even worse, more budget SSD. But what I did notice was that in the other order, the page file on the worst drive and the game on the better drive, the game actually performed worse. So it looks to me like the page file is the more important drive for streaming data in this game, and that if you can maybe sort out your page file, maybe consider putting it on a volume that isn't your Windows volume. I actually tried it on a hard drive. In so many ways it was better. My frame rates were better. The microstutter was dropped versus having all 3, the page file, game, and on your system drive, having everything on one drive. Moving the game onto an old hard drive, or even moving my page file onto an old hard drive, was a step up. Now that being said, I only ever mucked around with premium hard drives. It probably was a 7200 RPM drive with a lot of cache. But irrelevant. An old hard drive doesn't hold up very well against even budget SSDs. Arguably, some small file writes maybe, or there's no overhead. with an old hard drive, and that's why I was using it. There's no CPU hits, whereas budget solid-state drives can hit the CPU hard, and that's what I've been trying to figure out in the last few days. But what I've come to realise is that now that the game streaming systems are mucked up, all these other systems are getting crunched, and so users are getting a whole run of different symptoms, I guess, that they can see. Now the cause really comes down to the VRAM that the game is using. It's just been lessened. But the effects or the symptoms we see are many and varied, and it just depends on what weaknesses your machine might have had. And before, because the game was working and was designed to work on lowest common denominator equipment, i.e. someone's gaming laptop with only one drive and not enough RAM and not enough VRAM also runs the game, right? It's because when they built it, they didn't want to deal with lots of calls from people that technically have above the minimum requirements, but because their rig's built a little bit more budget or doesn't quite have the power overheads of a proper desktop machine, those parts might not perform quite as well as their namesakes. And so they made the clever decision of just make the game work even on low-end hardware. Now, okay, don't get me wrong, this run I'm doing around town is a hardcore run designed to dump assets and reload assets, and then I run through the courtyard, which is a hard area to run. I am using a frame doubler. I want 30 frames a second as my minimum when running through that courtyard. On the whole, it seems to do that. I do watch as it runs up here in the hill. We go to the edge of Hogsmeade. It dumps everything as we come out here to what is essentially the open world. And then when I run back into town, it's got to reload that courtyard. And so this is a really good burden. And you'll actually watch as I run down this hill. My frame rate tanks. Microstutter kicks in for a brief moment, usually around about here. A couple of steps forward. And this shows, look at that. No more microstutter. Tiny amount as I turn into the courtyard there. So either the caching systems are starting to now keep track of the data and the microstutter is dropping off, which would align with what I was seeing yesterday, where further trips between the castle and Hogsmeade didn't have any microstutter over the bridge, etc., etc. So there's still little bits, but compared to yesterday where it was like every moment of play, anytime I was moving the camera, I was moving my character on the map. If I was just moving the camera, nothing. But if for some reason the game needed to be loading data, oh, it got pretty nasty. And I would just watch constant microstutter. But I just wanted to put up a video just for a little bit of proof that the game can be returned to a state of not having constant microstutter. That I seem to be arguing with a lot of people in the forums who sort of are of the belief that that they're Microsoft trained and that's not how page files work. And the game doesn't use a page file and etc. 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 Look, I've done a week of testing on this. I've done 4 days pretty hardcore testing just on drives. I would like to absolutely confirm, flying through trees isn't too ideal, I'd like to absolutely confirm that all my testing shows that my microstutter and my frame rates were all totally affected by what I was doing with my Windows page file drive. So for anyone saying the game doesn't use a page file, okay, fine, but till they can prove to me it doesn't, right? All my tests indicate it definitely does. And that sorting out your page file and or your game folder location, just in the short term, just until we get that hotfix reverted and we can use all our VRAM again and all these streaming subsystems don't have to work nightmare overtime, trying to deliver the basic files they always could. Right? That's the frustration I think that a lot of people have, is that my game worked flawlessly for a year and a half and now it doesn't. Right? Well, it's probably true. It's not necessarily anything that you've done wrong. In the short term, you can either ignore it and go and play other games, hope that patch comes inbound soon, or you can maybe get on top of it and maybe try some tricks, as suggested by others on the net. Please do me a favour, don't delete your shader folder. In-game, it has to rebuild all that data again and you'll get low frame rates for large amounts of time. You get reduced quality graphics while it's delivering, not ultra quality reflections or anything. And then bit by bit as they kick in, you'll watch your frame rates sort of return back to where they were prior to deleting said folders, as your graphics finally start to look good again. But it does lead to shaders being generated in the background while you're playing the game, and that math is very different to the regular math that the video card is basically doing when flying around the game world. And it's pretty heavy on some of the math parts of your GPU, which generally makes your GPU not hit its peak clock speeds. So if you delete your shader folder, what you'll find is that you'll probably be locking your GPU into lower states of capability while playing the game for quite a few hours, if not days, while you rebuild those shaders in-game. So my best way around it, not wanting to just rename the folder back again, I took I'll wait days in-game method of sorting it out, and yeah, letting day-night cycles go past, you know, parking the camera in such a spot where it's not working too hard that your GPU is not 100% used. Okay, so this is the other one I'm testing. Okay, that's not the worst I've seen of it. See how that microstutter is really high and then my low frame rate has dropped down to 7 and my GPU power drops right down as it's either waiting for data, which is my belief, but you got to remember I'm using these budget horrible drives, and now that that's on the page file, I wonder if a second approach, look, I was going to wind up the video just there, but just for academic testing purposes, let's just fly down here. Look, this is my worst case loop where I expect the frame rate to drop to about 50 as I get past the first wave of trees here, and that should progressively drop down to essentially 24 frames a second. It'll show as 48 as I jump the fence. No, it's gone a bit lower, so my system's running a little bit less than ideal. Alright, so, but you know, don't judge your system based off mine. You can see I'm not at frame sync right now as I run around these really hard to render areas. That the exception, not the rule, to the lion's share of my game, which is tweaked for hitting the frame rates I want. Scenes like this, maybe not, but then if I run around the corner, I should be back to 60 pretty quickly. Alright, so, oh, missed. Alright. Yeah, switch controllers have about millisecond latency. You can plug them in via USB, I believe, same as PlayStation controllers. Probably is the recommended way to do the gaming. Let's see now, so that should have cleared it data out. How severe is it the second time round? It's pretty bad. Okay, so that there is entirely exacerbated by my crap drives I put the game on. That's not a problem, right? That's not a problem at all, right? The Intel solid state drive that the game is on is a read speed of less than about 200 megabytes. And even then, I think it's it might be peaking at 300. And it's only if like your CPU can assist. And when I was measuring the budget drives, be it the Samsung Evo and the Intel drive, they could essentially use up to 2 full cores of my CPU when moving game data. Right? They're budget drives. They don't have expensive controller chips in them that alleviates the math. They use your CPU processor for the compression and decompression of drive writes and reads. So if your CPU is only just the bare minimal to play the game Hogwarts, and all of a sudden your budget SSD is being smashed, you might find massive performance issues because all of a sudden you're being CPU capped in a way that you previously were not. Anyway, it's not the point of this video for me to make all sorts of wild claims that people are then going to come and argue with me, right? As a techie, I'm telling you, this stuff is factual. I've been servicing computers since the 80s, but professionally since the early 90s. I started my first PC business. Tweaking and optimising games has certainly been, at the very least, a hobby of mine since the 90s, where I started doing high levels of overclocks and playing with a lot of the kit. But I mean, I can live and breathe this stuff. I can see what's going on right now. People might wish to argue with me that moving their drive, they shouldn't have to. I totally agree with you. But if you want to get on top of things in the short term until that patch comes out, you can do it. And look, this performance last night it was fine. And so these couple of spots where the game is really poor, because the Intel drive that's serving the data for the game is so low quality, until the game starts loading off that Samsung page file, which is twice the speed of the Intel one, it doesn't seem to be able to keep up. And that's probably why I'm getting lots of little bits of microstutter. So arguably at this point, if my page file was on a different disk and my game was on my system disk, I'd probably have my best case scenario for playing. That is, the game would be able to load straight to the page file. The page file would then be on its own little drive where it could just load straight up to memory or VRAM as need be. So yeah, look, I do encourage, power is in your hands. You can have zero microstutter even with the current builds of the game. Some would argue that what I'm showing today is not zero microstutter, but I mean the reality is, when we know what's causing the moments where we've got jank, and I can fix them just with a quick reboot, right? I could go and sort them out. I would say, academically speaking, all the examples I can show where this is running with no microstutter, rendering screens that are quite hard to render, I'd say it's good, right? But everyone's experience is different. Some people like to play the game at hundreds of frames a second. I think it's a very beautiful game. I would rather see the eye candy and see it looking really nice. So yeah, these frame rates are pretty bad. I might have to play around a bit. But the thing is, what we're looking at is microstutter. The second column and the second reading down on it, which is currently saying 0.0. And it's been that way now for a while, even with all the frame tearing and all the graphical issues I've got going on, right? That micro stutter is nil. And then I get some as I say that. But that is the loading transition for this zone. So, look, anyone that can see doubled up character there, whenever my frame rate goes below 60, the frame gen can be witnessed. I do think my recording device might exacerbate that. If I play around black frame insertion and record at, I don't know, 120 shutter speeds, like 1/20th of a second shutter speeds, I might be able to isolate individual frames, but the way that I record this, I probably merge frames. So whilst I'm seeing at 60, any graphical issues I see are 1/60th of a second. Anyone at home watching this, any graphical issues they see is at 1/30th of a second, so the persistence on the screen is twice as long. And so, no doubt, watching this video, you see errors that I basically don't notice when playing. With the exception if I pan the camera at 360 degrees when I'm on my broom and my frame rate drops below 60, I can maybe see a doubling up of my character. But that's neither here nor there, and the doubled frame rate certainly allows me to run at much higher resolution with all the settings cranked, and basically hit VSync if I tune for it. So, you know, enjoy your Hogwarts, enjoy your micro stutter at close to 0. I'm going to fly back over this loading zone up here as a really low frame rate mode. Here we go. So look, you can enjoy this game. You can. It's doable. Right? It's doable right now. Proof of the pudding is in the eating. Here's some sample footage to just reassure you, right, that this stuff isn't just myth. It might be real. There we go. Look at that. Flying at the screen. Oh, pretty. But look, it is a great game. It's probably worth persevering. We need that hotfix patch to come out to return our VRAM to us. If that happens, all of this sorting out the streaming issues in the short term probably won't be needed. So if you're adverse to tinkering with your computer, don't. Just leave it be. Go play something else. Come back to this one very shortly. And trust me, there's lots of people complaining. It's going to get fixed one way or another. And if not, a really good guide will come out telling people step by step how to set up their machine to make it work. But in the meantime, maybe relocate some files. Maybe put your system file, your page file on a different disk or volume. There's guides on the net for doing that. Move the game drive. And whatever you do, don't delete your shaders folders or rename them to old. Right? That'll just create more issues than solutions. Okay, well wishes with. If I see you in the next one, I'm sorry to hear that. That means you're still getting troubleshooting done. But look, great day for you.